Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy, for the night because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. And what do we have going on today? Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. The Philadelphia Eagles take on the Los Angeles Rams this weekend in the NFC divisional round. By God, they've got one hell of a slobber knocker on tap. It is going to be quite the game. There are already prognosticators, meteorologists claiming that there just may be some snow in the forecast. Could we perhaps have Snow Bowl Part 2? And if so, does that behoove the Philadelphia Eagles? We're going to get into that. Plus, we'll get into some other teams and some other stuff later on in the show. There is a lot to get to today. And I don't know, it'll either be today or maybe on Monday. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't done the video game corner in a while. But there was some news that got me very excited as somebody who enjoys playing the video games from time to time. But before we get there, as always, I'm going to rush out as fast as I can to the comments on the show, and then we got to get into what is to come. And this might come as a surprise to you, but the national media, once again, the fake news, the lame news, they are once again poo-pooing on Jalen Hurts and this Philadelphia Eagles team. Underdogs. Could be. We're going to get there because we're going to go back to some of our favorite friends from the national media who continue to just make themselves look dumber and dumber and dumber each and every week. And if the Eagles walk away with a win on Sunday, these national media pundits are going to look even dumber and dumber and dumber one more time. At some point, they might catch on, but we'll find out. I noticed that Jim Cochran is already in here with the EAGLES Eagles. I triggered a bunch of people on Instagram especially. TikTok was like mostly friendly to the take, but Instagram, there were some mouth-breathing Eagles fans who were very, very upset that I said the people who chant EAGLES Eagles at non-Eagles games should be banned from the arena. I had a guy who was like, somebody tell this guy nobody cares what he thinks, as he comments on the video. And there was somebody else this morning, I forget what they said, but sometimes I just enjoy having a little bit of a clap back. Somebody also said I have a slappable face, which is probably fair. I'd say more of a slappable five-head, but you might be able to get a little bit of good contact here. I might have to shave the beard off, just go back down to the mustache. That'll give a little bit more slappable area. But hello to everybody. Welcome in. It's going to be a nice Friday. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, and I do have a little bit of news. Do you want a little bit of news? I'll give you some news. If you're a Flyers fan and you've been waiting for a new Snow the Goalie, we're doing a Snow the Goalie today. So rejoice and be glad. Snow the Goalie returns from the comfort of our own homes today. And then I think we've actually worked out a time with the team that we're going to be doing the show every Tuesday down at Wells Fargo Center in the Snow the Goalie studio. So I do come bearing good news if you're a Flyers fan. All right, I'm done sipping coffee. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Let's go out to the comments. Chris Freed says, question of the day. Who will win more games during the rest of January, the Eagles or the Sixers? Well, if all goes well, the Eagles will end up having, 3 wins in January, and then you want that big one in February. Will the Sixers get more than 3 wins this month? It's unfortunate that we even have to entertain the notion. I think the Sixers will still finish. What the hell do I know? What do I know? Chris Freed says, in honor of Inauguration Day, Monday's episode should start with Kate Smith singing God Bless America if the Eagles win, taps if they lose. How about it, Russ? Well, I'll tell you what. You are going to hear from a whole bunch of former presidents on Monday's show. There's a good chance that some former presidents will call into the show or will make their presence felt on Monday's show for the inauguration. Hint, hint. I might go very off the rails on Monday. And it will kind of depend on how the Eagles game goes. But, Chris, I think you're on the right track. Nico with a what up. Andrew Fawcett with a yo-yo. Jersey is back with a GM. I believe that's a good morning. Michael Sirkin says that hit on Paling last night was rough. Not sure how the refs didn't call a penalty. Jersey agrees. Dirty hit. if you missed the game last night, and we're not gonna break down the Flyers game from last night much, if at all. If we do, it'll be very late in the show today. Ryan Poehling took what looked to be a shoulder to the head. There was no attempt by the Islanders player to move out of the way. Depending on which telecast you listen to, because if you just perused X last night to look for more angles, the Islanders' home telecast very clearly believed that it was shoulder to shoulder. Boucher thought that on the angles that he could see, that it very much looked like shoulder to head. We had people doing Zapruder film to try to figure out what exactly happened. So it was not a good hit by any stretch of the imagination. And Poehling was slow to get up. It was kind of a mess. However, your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers put out a very strong effort and picked up a win. So, you have that. If nothing else, you got away with the win. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see if the NHL disciplinary committee meets and renders any kind of a further punishment. But as of right now, it doesn't appear that way. Greg Bondarenko says, good morning, fellas. And ladies. There are ladies in the chat as well. Greg. Come on, Greg. You wonderful person. You're checking in here in the comments in the morning. Although maybe you didn't see that any of the ladies were here. But Jamie is here. Jamie says, good morning. Agreed. Absolutely disgusting. They didn't even call a penalty, even after review. Torts got very livid. Torts was absolutely on fire on the bench. And that's one of those times that you're happy, very, very happy that Torts is there to raise hell. Chris Reed says, quietly, I thought it was a hard, solid legal hit. Greg thinks that the guy's a marked man, I guess, in the next game. Andrew Fawcett says the Poehling hit was terrible. Officials were awful last night. Greg also notes that they played the Islanders 2 more times this month. That is correct. And as Andrew notes, look for the fireworks because they probably will happen. Let's keep going. Nico dropping a bunch of Eagles in the comments. Chris Freed says Barkley runs for 300-plus yards if it snows. I mean, a very strong run game. If it does snow, and if it snows to the level that people think it might snow, my friends, I will tell you, if it snows that much, advantage very clearly Eagles. I actually was at Snow Bowl, the first one, the LaShawn McCoy game. Do we ever talk about this on this show? I don't know. I don't want to totally derail the momentum of the show this morning, but I will tell you that I ended up at that game as Eagles-Lions. I ended up at that game with my uncle and I think at least one of my cousins. And that was when I first started teaching in Phoenixville. And they would occasionally hit me up and say, do you want to go to the game? Sure. Tailgating, great time, awesome. It snowed a ton. We knew it was going to snow. We didn't know how much it was going to snow. Like, it started snowing kind of lightly when we started tailgating. By the time we got into the stadium, there's probably, 6 inches of snow at the very least on the ground. And then over the course of the next, hour and a half, I think we got up to 10 inches of snow. It might have been more. It was absolutely absurd. We came out, and my cousin, I think it was, didn't dress appropriately for there to be snow. He wore jeans, which was a very bad idea. I mean, I wore flannel jeans, but I also wore other stuff that's to kind of wick some of the water away. He was frozen, and so we left at halftime, which was a shame because it was the coolest atmosphere ever. And then we had to listen to the Eagles blow that game open, wide open. LaShawn McCoy having probably the most fun game of his career. We had to listen to it on the radio. And I'm in the back of this SUV. It's a very nice SUV. I believe it was a Lincoln. And we're slipping and sliding all over 95. And so I did what I do best. I said, you know what? If I'm going to die, I'd rather be doing it asleep. So I fell asleep. I woke up 3.5 hours later. Still weren't home. We're slipping and sliding on 422. And I was I'm just going to go back to sleep here for a little bit. And eventually I did. I think it took 4.5 or 5 hours to get back to the Phoenixville area from Lincoln Financial Field on the Snow Bowl game. So I will tell you that if by any chance we get that much snow again and you're heading down to the Eagles game, you shouldn't need to be told this, but I will tell you anyway. Make sure you have all kinds of spare stuff in the trunk. Spare blankets, hand warmers, perhaps a candle or two in case your battery in your car dies. I don't know. But make sure you're bundled up and you're ready to go. And if the traffic gets bad and you run out of gas, that you don't freeze in your car, because that would be a crappy way to go. All right. This This life advice has been brought to you by the Russ Joy Show. All right. Jamie Rollo says over on YouTube, we win by 50 if this becomes a snow game. Yeah, I mean, listen, we can get to the Matthew Stafford cold stats in a bit, but it is certainly beneficial to the Eagles if there's snow. T from the TO3 says, what up, Russ? And also says, great take on the Eagles take. Thank you, T from the TO3. Good old Trevor. Thank you. Linda Joseph says, new snow the goalie news is fantastic. Jamie says, great news. It's been too long. Yeah, we know. It's been very bad. Andrew Fawcett says, Tuesday snow the goalie podcast. We're going to get there. Let's see. Charlie Keidel. Is this like of the Keidels? Of the Keidel Keidels? Child of Phil Keidel? Who I used to do Crossing Broad FC with? Is that who I'm talking to? Or did Phil just go onto his kid's laptop to participate in the show? Either way, thanks for being here. But Charlie is correct, or Phil, or whoever in the Keidel household had this to say. They are correct. The Flyers should not be trying to win these games. They have some trades to make if they want to bottom out. Just not sure that they want to bottom out. Charlie also says, Barkley with a Shady-esque performance from the Snow Bowl. It'd be awesome. Now, I will tell you, all right, I need everybody to just come back around to this really quick. I'm all for a snowy game. 100%. I am 100% here for a snowy game. I love snow. I love football. I love football in the snow. If you were one of the people who didn't want Saquon Barkley to go after that rushing record in Week 18, because you're like, oh, he might get hurt, and if he gets hurt, the Eagles are screwed. Well, if this game gets blown wide open, and Saquon Barkley's still in there in the third quarter, you people had better be the loudest ones getting his ass out of the game. Because the last thing you need is a pulled hammy from Saquon Barkley as he's at 175 yards tearing up the Rams. Now, in fairness, if the game is close, well, he's going to be in there. I do worry a little bit about some of these guys, especially because your footing is absolute crap in the snow. Now, I'm sure that the field crew is going to do the best they can to clear whatever ends up landing on the field. However, I do worry about injuries in snowy games. That said, I am very much excited. I am very hyped for the possibility of there being a snowy game at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. I'm especially excited because if you've been following anything I've been talking about for the last week, I'm pretty convinced the Eagles are going to try to build a new stadium with a retractable roof at some point in the next 10 years. And in that case, you will no longer have snowy Eagles games. So enjoy them while they last, my friends. Enjoy them. Someday he shall look fondly upon the time that the snow fell upon the turf at Lincoln Financial Field, and the Rams came to town with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. Oh, I remember it so fondly. I remember watching the snow fall from the sky as the clouds opened, and Saquon Barkley lit up the world he left behind him. Rams falling at his ankles, and the snow began to melt under his feet. They handed him the rock, and he took it all the way to the end zone. Oh, I remember that day fondly. Back in my youth, back before the Eagles built this new stadium with a retractable roof. Oh, my child, you shall never know the day. You shall never know what the home field advantage at Veterans Stadium was. You shall never know what home field advantage when the snow was like at Lincoln Financial Field. Oh, but someday you may. Yeah, today's an off the rails show. Confirmed. Very much. All right. Let's see. Oh, Jersey must be going to the game. Says who else is going to the game? If you're going to the game, let Jersey know. Could there be a meetup? Meetup of Russ Joy Show listeners, viewers at the game? I won't be there, but maybe a bunch of you can. Could be fun. JH just says, go Birds. Raymond Sepper says, I do expect the Rams to show up and play football. It's not like they're going on an Antarctic trip with Admiral Byrd. All right, fine. That's also fair. Now, I do want to get into what we can expect. But before we do, we'll get to the preview of Eagles-Rams. I want to just make sure that I take all of you on this magical adventure that we've been able to go on by virtue of some of the national media just going out of their way kind of poo-poo the Eagles, to kind of poo-poo Jalen Hurts. And at some point, I feel like these people are supposed to remember that they've been very wrong about the Eagles quite a few times. They've been quite wrong about a lot of the things that they've had to say about the Eagles this season. And it's weird because there's like a little bit of hypocrisy out there, but there's this weird thing that's happened of late where one national media pundit will say, well, the Eagles are maybe the best team in the NFC. They could maybe be the best team in the National Football League. And then at the same time, they can turn around and say, well, they're the most likely to get upset against the Packers. And then you look at this weekend and they say, well, the Eagles are probably the most likely to get upset by the Rams. That's the matchup that's most likely to go that way. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know if I believe that. I have legitimate concerns and I have legitimate questions about how this Rams team is going to react to potentially being stuck in the snow at Lincoln Financial Field. But I think the Rams are an exponentially better team than Minnesota. As I said at the beginning of the week, I was not afraid of Minnesota in the least bit. I was not a Sam Darnold believer. At no point this season did I think Sam Darnold was having this amazing career renaissance that was going to lead them to massive success. I just didn't see it. Not at all. Do I think the Rams are a scarier team? I do. Do I think that the Rams are in pole position to be the team that pulls off the biggest upset of the weekend? No, I don't. I still think that the Eagles should walk away with a win. Now, I'm going to try, and we know how this has been going of late, I'm going to try to give you some insight into what some of the national media folks are saying about Jalen Hurts. Now, I will need all of you in the comments to let me know if you can hear it or not, because for some reason the other day especially, every time I went to share something on the screen, it went to poo-poo, and we can't have that. So I'm going to throw this over, and hopefully everybody's going to be able to hear it. And if you can't, you're going to let me know, and I'm going to have to take it down and put it back up, and it's the whole thing. I first want to start with all-time great Eagles backup quarterback, Chase Daniel. Not Chase Daniels, Chase Daniel, who backed up Carson Wentz and seems to really have a bone to pick with either the Eagles or perhaps with Jalen Hurts for some reason. I want to start with Chase Daniel. Let's go to him first, and let's hear what he has to say about Jalen Hurts. And the question that was posed is the criticism of Jalen Hurts too harsh? Let's hear what Chase Daniel had to say, because that's what it's all about. It's like the hokey pokey. That's what it's all about. Here we go.
I love that.
That's a great word to say it.
I love that. And I do think that at times, sure, it can be harsh, but at sometimes it's warranted when he's throwing the football. And I actually 100% agree with Nick Sirianni, and 100% agree with what you said. I actually think he's playing extremely well for the stuff that they're asking him to do. I think
for the stuff they're asking him to do. Oh, I feel slander coming. Is slander on the way again, Chase Daniel? Did you wake up feeling salty, a little bit spicy, un poco picante? Is that what is happening, Chase Daniel? Okay. He's doing a great job for what they're asking him to do. Okay. All right. Let's keep going.
For right now, for what they want him to do, like in my opinion, Jalen Hurts has always been a little bit of a limited passer when it comes to like.
We're back to this. The limited passer. Okay.
These extremely crazy concepts that you're seeing different quarterbacks do. Not that he can't do it. He feels more comfortable.
So hold on a second, because he just kind of made it sound like he's not a good passer, so he can't do these concepts, but now he's already contradicted himself within 8 seconds to, well, it's not that he can't do it, it's just that he doesn't like to do it, so he can't, he doesn't have the ability, or he doesn't want to. He doesn't like it, doesn't have the desire. What? Okay, we'll continue.
In the shorter underneath throws, but he also throws a really good deep ball and a go ball. I don't think you want Jalen Hurts reading these extremely complicated like route concepts.
You don't want Jalen Hurts having to read difficult, complicated route. Is he stupid? Is he dumb? Are we back to the Rush Limbaugh, Donovan McNabb argument here, Chase Daniel? Is that what we're doing? Is that where we are right now? Is this what's happening? So you don't want him to have to do anything advanced. Jalen Hurts, give Jalen Hurts ball. Jalen Hurts run. Give Jalen Hurts slant route to throw. Sometimes give Jalen Hurts ball, throw, go route. Yes. That's all Jalen Hurts is apparently capable of doing. Thank you, Chase Daniel. Okay, let's continue.
because at times it slows them down. And I think that's the thing that sometimes
it slows him down. Having to read complex coverages and complex routes slows him down. Well, in theory, if you are going through your reads, it's going to take you a little bit longer than if you just go to your first read immediately and throw the ball. Yes, that is how that works. And he knows that because he's played in the NFL. He also has a great offensive line that affords him the ability to read a defense and to have the time to execute a play. Now, whether or not he makes the right decision, you can have your own opinion about that. But the reason that he has the time and that he takes the time to supposedly read the defense is because he's afforded it, because he has a great offensive line. All right, we'll continue.
As we say is like, hey, it looks like he's playing in slow-mo. Is he not processing? Is he not doing this? No, you give him half-field reads, and there's nothing wrong with that. You give him full-field reads. You give him full progression. We call them, we haven't said it a long time, sweepers, which Kellen Moore is doing, is sweep the field. And I think at times, the only criticism that I have, and
there's only one criticism. Now, if you've been keeping up with Chase Daniel, there are more than one criticism. All right, well, fine. One criticism.
People think I'm a huge Jalen Hurts hater. I'm not. I just want to see him let go of the football in 50-50 ball situations, because you have one of, if not the best duos in all of football with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. And when you look at the Eagles team on offense, I think they're a superstar team. Like, you look at the best offensive line in football. 4 of the 5 were either named All-Pro, Pro Bowl, or both. Like, the whole offensive line has something.
That is a fair critique. That is a fair, if you want to call it a criticism. I wouldn't, but that is fair to an extent, sure. The offensive line is highly touted. We all know that the Eagles have arguably the best offensive line in football. That's fine. The idea of Hurts having to be willing to throw a 50-50 ball to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, we'll get back to that in a second. There is a little bit of truth to it. We'll get there. All right, so far, Chase Daniel kind of pulling his head out of his keister. And in fairness, from one big-headed human to another, and he's a pretty big head. You got to dislodge it. Probably not that easy, but all right. It's starting to make a little bit more sense. But he does have about 20 seconds here to screw it up again, so let's see.
You have the best receiving duo in football. You have the best running back in football. And because his supporting cast is so great, I think the one thing that we decide to look at and decide to pick at is Jalen Hurts. Not to say he's not great, because the dude was all pro. But I think right now, this season, he's only thrown for 2,900 yards. So at times, the criticism is warranted when he doesn't do the things that they ask him to do.
Well, he only threw 2,900 yards, due in part to the fact that he had a concussion that cost him multiple games. That could maybe be a little bit of it. They had the best running back in the league, who perhaps could have set the single-season rushing record if he had played in Week 18, or perhaps had continued playing against the Giants in the first matchup against New York this season. I don't know if Chase is aware of this. There really are only so many possessions you have. There are only so many plays you have. And if you do, in fact, have a guy who's within striking distance of setting the all-time rushing record, chances are that quarterback is not going to set his own personal records. And if he misses multiple games because of a concussion, it's possible that he's not going to be able to reach an arbitrary threshold that you have set because he has missed multiple games. Okay, now that we've cleared that up, Chase Daniel actually made a little bit of sense there. Here's the problem, and there's a big problem. Earlier in the season, and even last season as the Eagles were collapsing, what was one of the big critiques and one of the big criticisms of Jalen Hurts? It was that he was turning the ball over too much. Whether it was interceptions, whether it was fumbles, he was turning the ball over. And ultimately, down the stretch last year, the Eagles fell apart. And they got their doors blown off in the playoffs against Tampa Bay. You fast forward to the first 4 weeks of this season. There were a lot of criticisms, once again, of Jalen Hurts and his ability to maintain the ball, maintain possession, not turn it over. Around the bye week, there was a conversation had between Sirianni and Hurts, which was in an article that we'll get to here in a little bit. Fantastic reporting by Tim McManus. They had this conversation, and they clearly made it a point of emphasis that this team can win and Jalen Hurts can win without having to force anything, without having to do what Chase Daniel's old starting quarterback Carson Wentz used to do, which was try to throw the ball into the tightest window in triple coverage and oftentimes turn the ball over. Jalen Hurts has the arm strength to get you down the field on a 50-50 ball. But if you're winning because you're protecting the ball, and if you're winning because you're setting up and establishing a running game that can bust a big play open at any time in a game, and if you have a great tight end who can either blow the top off a defense or can get you critical yards in a short yardage situation in Dallas Goedert, you can lean on that and win games. And yeah, you know what? You might not want to throw a 50-50 bomb right down the field and risk an interception, but you can get Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown the ball 10, 15 yards down the field and get them in open space and let them pick up a ton of yards after making that catch. All of those things are possible within this offense. But a big part of why the Eagles have been winning and winning the way they have since the bye week in week 5 is because Jalen Hurts has fundamentally changed the way that he plays to protect the ball, to maintain possession, and limit mistakes. You can't, on one hand, criticize the guy for taking those shots at the end of last year and the beginning of this season and turning the ball over, and then at the same time, complain that he's not turning the ball over because he's not taking those same shots now. Are they winning games? Yes. Do they look as strong as they ever have? Yes. Does Jalen Hurts put up 300 plus yards per game? No. Did Jordan Love have more passing yards and completions last week than Jalen Hurts? Yes. Did the Packers win? No. What would you prefer? Seth Joyner, I don't remember if I played this clip earlier in the week. Seth Joyner was like the voice of reason this week. It was amazing. And one of the things that he said was people got to get off of Hurts. They got to get off his back, right? Like the things that people were complaining about on Monday about, well, Jalen Hurts, he's not playing elite enough football as a quarterback of this team. He doesn't look like a legitimate throwing threat. That's not going to work in the playoffs. Those people would have apparently preferred a Jordan Love-esque game where you throw for 200 plus yards, but then you throw multiple interceptions. Like apparently don't change the formula. If you're the Eagles, you don't change the formula. And if you have a quarterback who's getting paid to be the franchise cornerstone like Jalen Hurts is, and he is willing to do this and is understanding of the concepts and understanding of if this is how we're going to have to win, this is how we're going to have to win. If he's willing to put what most consider a big ego from a quarterback aside to go out and not put up gaudy numbers through the air and not take those shots and risk possessions, if he's willing to do that, then everyone else just needs to back off, man. Let the team win how they're going to win. We all know how this team has to win. The defense has to continue to play at a whole other level. They've been great at it. What they have done in recent weeks, especially being able to force as many turnovers as they have, that is what you love to see going into the playoffs. That's what you love to see early in the playoffs, in the first round, in the wild card round against Green Bay. That's obviously what you would like to see them force against Matthew Stafford this weekend. Take the win how you get it. Don't overcomplicate this. Don't try to turn Jalen Hurts into Lamar Jackson. They're not the same player. Don't try to turn him into Josh Allen. They're not the same player. Don't try to turn him into Patrick Mahomes. They're not the same player. Now, when Hurts was in the Super Bowl a few years ago, he went, in fairness, he played the game of his life, and he pretty damn well matched Patrick Mahomes. But that's not what this team has found as the winning formula this year. If it just needs to be Jalen Hurts, the dual threat quarterback, who picks up yards where you need him to, who's able to get those wideouts into open field opportunities for big chunk plays, great. You don't change that now to pacify a backup quarterback on FS1. Don't change the formula. It's working. Don't overcomplicate this. Stick with what has won you these games. Okay, so that was Chase Daniel. Okay, that was what he had to say. Now, he wasn't the only one who had something, but Jim Cochran asked, because he was wearing the flannel, said, did Chase just come back in from splitting wood out back? I don't think so. I can't imagine that Chase Daniel's a wood splitter, to be honest with you. We'll see. Chris Freed says, Hurts just doesn't like to pass the ball in the middle of the field. There's some truth to that. There is. I think a lot of that is just limiting the potential for turnovers. Going back to Charlie over on YouTube says Chase Daniel wants to go back to the good old days where you could be dog shit, but at least you played the game the right way and knew the playbook inside and out. Hurts is 10 times the player he ever was. He might be more than 10 times the player. The crazy thing about Chase Daniel is, he got paid a lot of money to be a backup quarterback and never have to really do much of anything. That's the wildest part. Like, this isn't a guy who is like, if this were like Vinny Testaverde, or this were like Joe Flacco, who was a franchise quarterback, then was kind of out of the league, came back in and helped a couple of other teams later in his career. That's one thing. Chase Daniel was never the guy. So it's just weird. There's a lot of pent-up frustration, we'll call it. Chris the Wreckage Bruce over on YouTube says, didn't Joe Burrow throw for over 4,000 yards this season? Remind me what time the Bengals game is, LOL. Enough is never enough with Jalen Hurts. I mean, that's a fair point. Yeah, the funny thing, right? I'm not going to go off on this Joe Burrow tangent, but I have one that's like stored away, and sometimes I let it out. Joe Burrow is a really good quarterback. There is no doubt. However, how many years now have we watched Joe Burrow's team get off to an absolute dog shit start of the year and then get lauded down the stretch when it's like, oh, look at this. Joe Burrow has once again taken a team that started 2-5. He took a team that started 3-6, and they're within a couple of losses on Sunday and a win of their own, and they could punch their ticket to the playoffs. And then who's going to want to face Cincinnati? I don't know. Maybe just don't maybe don't start the season like 1-3 or 2-4 or 3-6 or wherever the hell you're at. Like, maybe just try to win games early. I don't know. Call me crazy, but it's a fair point. I mean, Burrow, really good quarterback. If you could plug in Joe Burrow for Jalen Hurts right now, would you do it? I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people would. But again, I come back to Burrow's not playing. He ain't there. Justin Herbert, who a lot of people seem to love and extol the virtues of. Is he playing this week? Nope. Sometimes you have to have a guy who just knows how to manage the game. And I think the big misconception is whenever you hear somebody refer to Jalen Hurts as a game manager now, people all of a sudden go back to Trent Dilfer. And they're like, oh, that's what we all call Trent Dilfer. There were some people who even called Brock Purdy a game manager, right? Hurts is not that kind of player because he has a significantly higher ceiling than Trent Dilfer did. But the idea is that Hurts is smart when it comes to managing how to win. He has that it. We covered this earlier this season. Saquon Barkley went on record, said that the guy just has it. You can't quantify what it is, but he's got it. He has this winning DNA. And again, he's gotten you this far. We'll see what this weekend looks like. I mean, anything could happen, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let's see. Jamie says there are way worse quarterbacks. Oh, there we go. See, I didn't even see this, Jamie, but I'm glad that we're on the same wavelength. So there are way worse quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls with great defenses. Trent Dilfer with the 2000 Ravens, anyone. That is 100% correct. That is the one that I always go to. Let's see. Jim Cochran says backup QBs just have the right amount of talent. Millions of dollars, great game or great seats for games, no post-career CTE. It's a good call. It's a good point. Chris also notes they failed to mention the lack of consistency with the offensive coordinator for Jalen. That is also very fair, which is why I know Kellen Moore has multiple head coaching interviews, and there's a little bit of frustration. I know that there are some people who are frustrated in the media, right, who go on the radio, and I saw Bill Colarulo yesterday had a whole thing about how frustrating it is and how teams that are in the playoffs, those coaches should be able to interview for jobs, but it should be post-Super Bowl. And while I understand the sentiment, that'll never happen. I think the Eagles need to do whatever it takes to keep Kellen Moore here as the offensive coordinator. I think that they owe it to Hurts to try to give him some consistency year in and year out. And so far, this does look like the most competent offensive scheme the team has had in a few years at the very least. Give the guy some consistency, have him come back. Offer him Boku bucks. Jeffrey Lurie has enough money. Figure it out. Bring Kellen Moore back. It's fine for him to go interview for head coaching jobs. I don't view, if something were to go horribly wrong this weekend, I'm not looking back at it and blaming Kellen Moore because he had head coaching interviews. That's not it. That doesn't do it for me. That's not it. But I would like to see the Eagles just retain him or make him an offer where it's dude, if you want to go do these interviews just for experience, you can, but we'd much rather just have you come back. Here's almost head coach money. Just stay as the OC for another year, please. Yeah, and then you see. Jersey says, I bet Chase never beat a first-ranked defense in the NFL. during his first official start like Jalen. There you go. Chris Reed asks, would you fire Nick Sirianni to keep Kellen Moore? I don't think, well, no, I wouldn't, because there's a story that came out this week that makes me now feel like this locker room is 100% behind Nick Sirianni. So, no, I wouldn't. And not just for keeping Kellen Moore. And it seems like those two have a decent enough rapport, at least you would think. There has been nothing to this point that would suggest that Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni have beef or anything. So that's another big positive. Okay. I have one other media hot take that I want to get to, and then I want to get to the story that will give you some positivity, and then we'll preview the game a little bit, and then we'll get on out of here. You should not be surprised at this point. I don't know if it's not like an FS1 bias here. I just enjoy, I guess, some of the hilarity of what comes out of FS1. And so I want to go over to a friend of the show. He doesn't know he's a friend of the show, but he's a friend of the show because he constantly says goofy shit, and that's Chris Broussard. And then we'll also throw it out to our guy Nick Wright, who just like me has long hair and a big nose. So he and I share those two features together. He gets paid a lot of money to talk about sports on TV. I don't. So there are differences. There are levels to this. And so I commend Nick Wright. But we're going to go back out to FS1 here for a second. And the big point of conversation here was, does Jalen Hurts deserve more credit for the Eagles' success this season? Now, if you go off of what Chase Daniel said, he was more of the mindset that Hurts deserves the credit for executing what he is asked to do, and then also kind of backhand compliments him, implying that he can't read a defense and that you can't have Hurts do anything complicated because his brain can't handle it. That's what Chase Daniel made it sound like. Let's go over. We're going to go back over here to the fine folks at FS1, and let's hear what Chris Broussard and Nick Wright had to say about whether or not Jalen Hurts deserves more credit for the Eagles' success this season.
This is the sad part of this whole situation. And I understand Jalen cannot come out and say it. Sirianni cannot come out and say it. This is all A.J. Brown.
Thank you.
This is all
That's
A.J.
exactly
Brown.
right.
Even before the reading the book. But was anybody talking about Jalen Hurts like he can't throw the football? They don't throw it in. No. We understood what Jalen Hurts was.
Some smart people
He's a great
just picked
running
him to go to the
quarterback.
Super Bowl.
Right. He can pass it fairly well, but that's
can pass it fairly well. We're back to the fairly well. Now, it seems like maybe the lead into this was the idea that the discourse about Jalen Hurts as a passer came up because of A.J. Brown weeks ago saying the thing about passing. So he's trying to give Hurts an out here, but then also says that he's a fairly good passer. Okay. Let's see. You can see. Now, this is, you can see my mouse here. Here we go. So Nick Wright does this sometimes. Right as he's about to unleash a hot take, you can see him. He's physically holding in the hot take here. He's crossing the arms, right? The jacket is buttoned. He's trying to hold in the hot take, but it's building up. It's like a teapot, right? It's like right as the teapot is about to, it's like a, you can see it.
That's not the main thing you do, and it was fine. Saquon was the story. Maybe he's going to break Eric Dickerson's record.
That's
and
true.
then A.J. opens his mouth, and now since then, it's all about can Jalen throw? Can Jalen throw?
Hold on.
There is a little bit of fairness to that. I will give Chris Broussard a little bit of credit. He is sort of right that a lot of the national media focus, we'll call it, on Jalen Hurts as a passer came up due in large part to what A.J. Brown said when he said the passing thing a few weeks ago. However, ever since Hurts has broken into the league, there have been questions. There have been people who have kind of made it sound like he can't read a defense. He's an iffy at best passer. So I kind of disagree, but I sort of get where he's at. But here we go. Nick Wright, he has now unburdened himself. He has unburdened from what has been. He's now opened the arms. And so he went from because they're taking the lid off, or they're taking the teapot off the heat. I do wish that was a soundboard. That's just my voice. It doesn't feel great after I do that. I probably shouldn't do it anymore, but here we are.
Hold on. Everything you're saying is true, but then Jalen also, the next game came out and was like,
he flexed.
that's what y'all wanted to see.
Well, it's true. He was tired of it.
Okay, well, we'll pick a lane, right? Because
That's rich coming from Nick Wright. Okay, continue.
That what y'all wanted to see, I'm tired of it, is different than all I care about is winning. And it's just
he just gave you a little taste.
So I don't.
This dude is totally right, by the way, because everybody gets on Hurts for like post game, kind of doing the Hurts thing where he doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with. And he kind of gives you the stuff that looks like it's on inspirational posters, like in every principal's office and in every like high-level executive's office. Courage. This is what's needed to lead your team. And the one time that he doesn't do that, now Nick Wright's jumping on it. Okay, we'll continue.
I don't think Jalen deserves more credit. I think probably there are a handful of quarterbacks in this league who probably get a little more credit than their play is merited, and I think he's on that list.
Wow!
I think that essentially, like,
he's getting too much credit.
Like, if you're a quarterback on a great team, you are elevated no matter what level of play you're producing. And I think this year that right now, listen, a lot of the things I was wrong about with the Eagles, Vic Fangio's impact on the defense, Saquon Barkley's impact on the offense.
Those are two pretty big ones to be wrong about.
Nick Sirianni's ability to go a month without making a fool of himself.
I was also wrong about that one, though. I will join my fellow long-haired, big-nosed brethren and Nick Wright. I agree. I'm also there with him.
Wrong across the board on a lot of stuff. Those are the biggest driving factors to them being where they are. Now, Jalen has not held them back. Right. There was brief, but it was a little louder than Wilds' should Russell Wilson be in the MVP mix conversation for Jalen right after that. Is that what you wanted to see passing game?
Who ever talked about Jalen Hurts being in the MVP mix this year? Did I miss something? Have I been lobotomized? Did the Men in Black show up and zap me in the eyes? Does anybody remember anybody talking about Jalen Hurts being in the MVP conversation? I remember Saquon Barkley being in the MVP conversation. I do not remember a single national or local media pundit saying that Jalen Hurts should be in the MVP race this season. That is just inaccurate.
And then he got hurt and it went away. And I think that was like ludicrous. Like he didn't play at that level. So I think Jalen Hurts certainly doesn't deserve more credit for how he has played this year. I think he's probably gotten around the right amount of credit. He is a quarterback on a great team. He is not a great quarterback. He is a quarterback on a great team.
Yeah, I don't think he deserves.
Okay, I can't. I'm done there. What are we talking about? He's a quarterback on a great team. So he's not a great quarterback. He's a quarterback on a great team, which through osmosis makes him a good to above good quarterback. Is that how we're to interpret that? Okay. Again, nary a person talked about Jalen Hurts in the MVP race, and him getting hurt did not change that. That is not true. That is what happened a few years ago. That's what happened the year that the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. He was very much in the mix for MVP. And then he didn't end up winning it. He went down, and that was that. So no, like that's not what happened here. Methinks Nick Wright got a little bit flustered, just a wee bit. As I mentioned, he had the hot take loaded up, and then when he let it out, it didn't go over particularly well, and then he started doing the seat adjustment. Okay. I'm going to tell you why I'm feeling better about this week. And it's not because of Matthew Stafford. It's not because of Matthew Stafford in cold weather games. It's because of a story that Tim McManus put out. And I want to get to because there's an especially important blurb that came from the story. And a big part of it was just talking about why the Eagles have seemed to rally around Nick Sirianni the way they have. And again, this is fantastic work. It's over at ESPN.com. I would highly encourage everyone, if you have not had the chance to read the story in its entirety, I would highly encourage you to do so. But this is just a blurb, and this is about Jordan Mailata. So Mailata was called into Sirianni's offense and said, have a seat. You're not in trouble or anything. I just wanted to see how you're doing. How's Dad doing? Mailata says because he knew about Dad, which apparently not a lot of people had known about, but Mailata's dad suffered a heart attack on a plane ride back to Australia after making the trip to Arizona to see the Eagles and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl in 2023. And Mailata said that there was a time where his family wasn't sure if his dad would survive. Sirianni has served as a confidant to Mailata during that period, having sit-downs with him and creating a safe space for Mailata to talk and get my feelings out. That's his quote. He says he was very supportive of me and said if I needed to miss time, I could miss time. That meant the world to me. I love that guy. I'll do anything for Nick, to be honest. We all know that I'm a big Jordan Mailata guy. I think Jordan Mailata is like the definition of leadership. Jordan Mailata is like the American dream come to reality. Jordan Mailata is an absolute badass and seems to be a gentle giant with a heart of gold. So if Jordan Mailata will ride and die with Nick Sirianni, then I'm ready to say, all right, Nick, you've done well, kid. You've done well. Within that story, by the way, it is really funny. There's a funny anecdote about like them actually getting to that meeting that Sirianni had told Mailata to come to his office, so Mailata went and loaded up a plate of food because he's like, well, if I'm going to get yelled at least I'm going to get yelled at while I'm eating. But there's another anecdote in the story as well, and there's this thing that's revealed about how apparently Sirianni leaves handwritten letters in the lockers of his players throughout the season. That Nakobe Dean has one that Sirianni left in his locker, and he puts it in his bag, and he takes it to every game, and he reads it before every game. Rick Lovato was quoted in the story about talking about how special of a coach he is, about the personal touch, about when you have a coach like that, your team is tightly, it's a tightly knit group, and those are the teams that ultimately find the most success. Isaiah Rodgers had one. Maybe I confused Dean and Rodgers. I think that Nakobe Dean had one, but Isaiah Rodgers also had one that was left to him before his first start when Slay was out in December. When Slay was ruled out, Sirianni went and left him a handwritten letter as well. Yeah, I was right. There is a thing in here about Nakobe Dean as well. There was another one, though, that was wild. So Rick Lovato was the one who talked about the fact that he and his wife were struggling to have a kid. They were going through IVF, and that Sirianni sat down and talked to him a lot as well. This is the one. I want to get to this because this is one of those ones that if you have ever known anybody who's battled cancer, this probably will strike a chord with you in a nice way, like in a heartwarming way. But here you go. Milton Williams, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for all of you who are watching on the stream here. Let me change the angle here. Let's see. Can we get some bigger text here? There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. Defensive tackle Milton Williams isn't sure how Sirianni found out that his mom had breast cancer, but that led to their connection as Sirianni shared the difficulties of watching his dad, Fran, battle cancer multiple times throughout his life, including when Nick was a child. We talked on the phone. I came up to his office. We talked about everything, Williams said. He was telling me how hard it was for him with his dad, always being around him, and that he was an energetic guy, and seeing him have to go through that was kind of the same thing seeing my mom have to go through chemo and losing hair and being tired all the time. It was just encouragement and knowing how to deal with certain things. That is like another good personal anecdote. How many times do you hear about coaches in the NFL and in other leagues that they're total, hard asses, they don't really care to get to know their players? And then this is the flip side. This is the kind of stuff that you just don't see. These are the things that are behind the scenes. Again, when you hear these kind of things and when you hear players open up about it and you hear players open up about how much that personal connection with their head coach means, you then understand why it seems like this group, this year especially, is as close as they are. But this is what I want to kind of tie everything together with. And I mentioned this earlier on in the show, but there was a conversation in week 5 after the team's bye between Sirianni and Hurts. That they had a bunch of conversations, they hammered out a direction of the offense, and that's what led the Eagles' surge, going from starting 2-2 to finishing 14-3. And Hurts said, "I'm happy and fortunate we were able to come together in harmony and have the same goal in mind, trying to get this thing right. I got a ton of confidence in him, a ton of confidence in what he brings and everything that he's been able to accomplish." And there was a thing about the sources who admitted that things were off between Hurts and Sirianni last year. And it sounds like they have hammered things out. The source said, once you learn a person, you learn how to deal with that person. Now, does that mean that Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are besties? Are they on each other's Christmas card list? Who knows? Does that part really matter? No. If there's a mutual respect and an understanding that they just approach things differently, that's not bad. That's not a bad thing at all. So all of this is to say, this story comes out leading up to a big weekend, leading up to a big game against the Rams. And that leads us to the part of the show where we have to have a conversation about what is it going to look like? Are the Eagles going to win this game or not? And I have to tell you, as much as I don't like playing Teams of Destiny, and we talked about this the other day, I don't like playing Teams of Destiny. I don't like playing teams that have a bigger thing to fight for. The more I think about it, the more I feel like the Rams shot their shot last week, that the Rams got that win for the people in Los Angeles last week, and that when you travel cross-country, when you haven't been able to maybe focus as well on the task at hand because of what's been happening in LA, when you put that together with an Eagles team that, while they haven't won pretty games every week, continue to win and find ways to win. And as I've said all year, great teams find ways to win games when something isn't going right. I think the Eagles win this game. Now, I'm not ready to go on the record and say it's going to be like a 2-touchdown game. This could very well be a 1-possession game. This could be a last-minute field goal where Jake Elliott gets back everybody's confidence with like a knuckling 46-yard field goal in the snow. That'd be good for his confidence as well. But it is fair to point this out. And this is ultimately the thing that I will come back to. Matthew Stafford is a really, really good quarterback. And even at this stage of his career, he is a very good quarterback. And I'm not a huge historical stats guy. At least I'm not a historical facts guy from like the standpoint of like franchise-wise. The Eagles are blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah in cold weather games started from 1980 through now. Like that kind of stuff doesn't matter to me because the players are different, the coaches are different, the fields are different, everything's different, right? Matthew Stafford in his career is 1-8 with a 54.6 completion percentage, 14 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, and a 76 passer rating in outdoor games in the rain or snow. So if you want to call that cold, nasty weather, you want to call it snowy adjacent weather, slushy weather, 1-8, 54.6 completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 76 passer rating. That, my friends, is a historical trend that I can get behind. That's tied to the player. And my friends, that to me is going to be a large reason why the Eagles walk away with the win on Sunday. I think you are going to see an Eagles defense that gets after Matthew Stafford in a way that he is not used to being gotten after. I imagine that Saquon Barkley is going to have a massive day, and I would not be surprised to see Jalen Hurts force the issue with A.J. Brown after last week, and A.J. Brown goes for over 100 yards. Maybe he even puts up a touchdown or two of his own. There is a scenario here where the Eagles do open this game wide open. There is a chance that this ends up being a one-possession game. The thing that I don't foresee happening is the Rams getting a big win, and honestly, even though last week's game left a few of us feeling a little bit about the long-term Super Bowl projections here, I think the Eagles win. And I think the Eagles can win pretty damn big. Reed DeFord also checks in with a good stat here. Says Stafford was 10 of 25, no touchdowns, no interceptions the last time he played in the snow in Philly. Fantastic. That's a great number. Rams versus Eagles in the playoffs. Rams are 3-0. That means nothing, of course. That's not Johnny, in fairness, I don't think that matters. Kurt Warner's not walking through that door. Marshall Faulk is not walking through that door. Torrey Holt is not walking through that door. It ain't happening. Historical trends about teams head-to-head in the playoffs, if they're not, like, relevant to the last, like, let's say 5 seasons, they don't mean shit to me. They can mean something to you. Johnny says, I really hope the Eagles underestimate McVay in the playoffs. So, Johnny, I assume, is a Rams fan? I really, really hope the Eagles underestimate McVay in the playoffs. We'll see. I don't see it. But if you're a Rams fan, on a positive note, it's been at least a somewhat successful season getting this far, so that's a positive. It's a good thing. I think whoever wins this game ultimately does go on to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. If the Rams get past this Eagles team in hostile conditions, in bad weather conditions, I will believe that they're a team of destiny. So whether it's the Eagles or whether it's the Rams, I think that they'll get to the Super Bowl. Detroit is a threat, but there is like a weird part of me. I would not put money on Washington winning this weekend, but Jaden Daniels has something going on. There is a part of me that thinks there's a chance that Jaden Daniels makes that game very, very interesting late. And that Jaden Daniels might even have the opportunity to run a 2-minute drill with a chance to either tie the game or go ahead with a touchdown in regulation. I think it's going to be that close. Is it possible that Detroit's going to blow their doors off? Maybe. But I think that there's a chance Jaden Daniels has a hell of a game. Can you imagine if after all of the arguments about the rushing record, if after all the arguments about home field and the number 1 seed, can you imagine if the Eagles win this week, Washington upsets Detroit, and the Eagles host the Commanders in the NFC Championship game? That would be wild. Though in fairness, there's a part of me that would really like to see what Eagles-Lions in Detroit looks like, because I think that the Eagles would win in that game. I do. So we'll see. That's what I have for you today on the show. I can't remember if there was anything else that I wanted to try to get to today. I think that we got to each and everything that was on the rundown and was in the description of the episode. I did mention that there maybe are going to be some video game news. Maybe we'll get there in a second. Let me just go here real quick. So Johnny is a Rams fan, and that's okay. I don't hate the Rams. I don't. I actually used to like the Marshall Faulk and Kurt Warner Rams. I enjoyed those teams. The greatest show on turf. They were incredible. Johnny says, Rams have a better coach and quarterback. Eagles are better everywhere else. Yes, I'm a Rams fan. I think 26-21 sort of game that's close late. Eagles win and face Washington in the NFC title game. So Johnny and I are perhaps in alignment here. Johnny, welcome to the show. I don't know if you've been here before or if you just ended up here because the YouTube algorithm sent you here for Eagles Rams, but thank you for being here. I like this. This is good back and forth. Welcome, Johnny. Hit that like, share the video, and subscribe, just like everybody else. Okay. Chris Freed also says the only game that should be close this weekend is Ravens-Bills. That's going to be, I mean, if the football gods be good, that should be the game of the weekend. We all know it. That should, okay. If you don't want Kansas City to make it to another Super Bowl, if you want to see Kansas City get bounced, cheer for Baltimore. Because to me, I know that there are people who have like legitimate concerns about Lamar in the playoffs. Derrick freaking Henry with Lamar is as lethal of a QB RB punch you have. If you want to see the Chiefs get bounced out of the playoffs, cheer for Baltimore. I do not believe in Buffalo at all. I could be very wrong, and maybe Buffalo gives Kansas City a run for their money, but I think Baltimore is a much, much scarier matchup. If for no other reason than Baltimore is going to unleash Derrick Henry at some point, and when they do, there aren't many teams in the league that would be able to stop him. But that should be the game of the weekend, I agree. Brian over here asks, when can we expect Snow the goalie? At some point in the next few hours is the goal. It might be live, it might not be. We'll find out. Kind of depends on a few things here, but there will be a new Snow the goalie today. JH says, if it's another Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl, kill me now. No, it'll be okay. We'll see. Jersey is hoping for a bird bowl, getting Ravens versus Eagles, so we'll see. Okay, last second thing. On the way out, there was a little bit of video game news. The Nintendo Switch 2 got announced. I might talk about that next week. It looks very exciting. The bigger story, and I already warned my wife that like she might not have a husband for a while if this happens because my nights will be taken up by this game. There is a rumor that has gone around and seemingly has been corroborated by at least one other insider who would know. But there is a very credible rumor that the Halo Master Chief Collection, which includes Halo, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 4, and I think either Reach or ODST, might be coming to the PS5 this year. If I get Halo on PlayStation 5 and I can roll back the clock to high school and I can destroy people on Lockout playing Halo 2, good night. And we can all at each other and it'll be great. But boy, I would be very excited for Halo on PS5 because I have not bought an Xbox Series X. I kind of refuse to. And Halo Infinite seems like it was a bit of a mess. But if I get to play Halo on PS5, oh boy. Oh boy. All right, that's it. Mr. Bo99 asks, does a snow game benefit the Eagles over the Rams? Yes. I brought up the Stafford stats a little bit ago. At least historically, Stafford struggles in rain and snow, cold weather, all that. It would benefit the Eagles. Plus, they have the better running game, better running back. That's what I think. That's where I'm at. Okay. That is it for today's show. I want to thank everybody who joined me live. I want to thank everybody who listens after the fact in the podcast feed or watches on YouTube after the live show is over. Do me a favor, though. If you haven't done so already, click the like button because it's just a good signal to send to YouTube. Like the video. If you could share the video, even if it's to your spouse who's never going to watch it, you still hit the share. Apparently, YouTube likes that as well, so you share the video. And please subscribe to the channel. I think the last time I looked, we're getting close to 600 subscribers, which is a very nice thing to have happen. The channel continues to grow. We are 3 subscribers away from 600. We will see if I think we'll get over 600 this weekend. And then we'll see by next week, do the Eagles keep winning? And if they do, this show can go to the moon. But if you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, subscribe. You can find the show on any podcast app. I usually have it up there within an hour or two of the live show ending. So typically by noon on the same day of a show, you can find this show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. I concur with Jersey. Have a great weekend. Go Birds. If you are at a non-Eagles game this weekend, you officially have my permission to start EAGLES Eagles chants, to yell Go Birds at anybody wearing green or anything else, to yell Go Birds at Packers fans who apparently had a GoFundMe and tried to entrap people and got exactly what they were looking for. And the guy who said the mean thing to the lady should not have said the mean thing to the lady, but it does in fact appear as though this content creating asshole from the Packers side of things may not have been a very good human being after all and turned off all the comments and all that stuff. So maybe we gotta be a little bit careful in extolling the virtues of those people. But if you see a Packers fan, don't forget to remind them, Go Birds. If you see anybody wearing a Rams thing, remind them, Go Birds. Or you can be like that guy who got in the cop car on WNEP a few years ago, who leaned in and when asked, is there anything you want to say, said, Go Eagles. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. And let's hope that when we reconvene on Monday, we will be talking about the Eagles heading to the NFC Championship game. And if not, we'll still be here and we'll be breaking all that down as well. So until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I'm Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. And that's also the name of the show. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to all of you very, very soon.